Hello again everyone, and welcome back. My name is Esoro, and after a long wait, Conquerors of the Atlas is finally about to begin. And with it comes a complete overhaul to the endgame storyline. Waiting for you is a brand new array of endgame bosses to take down, but getting there might not be so easy. All of the act bosses have been improved and made more difficult, with some even receiving new skills. When you aren't fighting them, you're going to be coming up against the bosses of the Metamorph Challenge League, monstrosities that can transform at a moment's notice, leaving you in the dark as to what's coming next. Such a boss-killing league demands boss-killing builds, and I've just finished revisiting and improving upon all of my build guides. Each of them has been brought up to the standard that 3.9 demands, with many of them seeing Shaper and Elder-based items replaced with new alternatives. All of the builds have been made more accessible and easier to gear. Each of them now feature leveling and endgame versions of both the item set and the skill tree. With all of the builds ready to go, it's time to present you with my top selections for 3.9 Metamorph League starters. I'll be covering the pros and cons of each build, the flexibility of gearing, and how 3.9 changes affected the build. First up, we're going to have my recently released Stormburst Trickster, an extremely well-rounded build that gives you a lot of control. You can scatter your Stormbursts to clear the entire screen at one time, or you can focus them down to drastically increase our boss killing potential. Stormburst manages to be both a solid mapper and a potent boss killer rolled into one. Defensively, the build pushes over 8,000 effective life, has consistent fortify, a cast when damage taken steel skin support, extremely crucial access to stun immunity from both Escape Artist and from various nodes on the tree, consistently leeches both life and energy shield, and finally features a high block chance, reasonable chance to evade, some attack and spell dodge, and a chunk of physical damage reduction as well, with its only major downside being its channeling nature, meaning it has to stop to cast. But with the build's defensive layers and Stormburst's exceedingly versatile offensive capabilities, the build performs extremely well in almost all circumstances. Best of all, it can be geared very flexibly, even on a shoestring budget. Every single slot can be filled with a piece of rare gear if necessary, and the majority of the uniques that you'll find in the endgame set are very cheap, with even its most egregious examples proving to be only of moderate expense. Any of the uniques can be comfortably replaced with a variety of alternatives. With the arrival of 3.9, we saw minor changes to Orb of Storms, Fortify, and Onslaught support. All of these changes were quite minor in terms of their impact on the build, and will not functionally change anything about how the build performs. Enemy resistances have also been raised across the board, especially in bosses. We counteract a big chunk of this with an automatic cast of Wave of Conviction, which inflicts elemental exposure upon anything it hits, substantially lowering their elemental resistance. We'll also be seeing a very large power spike due to the newly introduced Awakened support gems, with many of them being very applicable to Stormburst. I made a variety of small changes to the build. The most notable is dropping Elemental Focus, allowing us to now chill, freeze, and shock our enemies with Stormburst directly. Stormburst is both flexible and powerful. The gem itself can be picked up at level 12 and used to level from there. If you're feeling interested in this build or want to find out more information about it, I've got a full deep dive build guide available right here. Next up is going to be my refined Lacerate Gladiator, a frantically fast, versatile, and exceedingly powerful melee build. Lacerate functions in two different forms. While in Sand Stance, Lacerate deals wider area of effect based damage, improving our clear speed. Alternatively, in Blood Stance, it focuses down into a smaller area, dealing more potent boss damage. We attack devastatingly quickly, inflict up to 8 powerful bleeds on each enemy, causing all bleeding enemies that you kill to explode, damaging everything near them. And to top it all off, we'll be stacking powerful impales on every enemy we hit. The build clears extremely comfortably and takes down even the highest tiers of bosses. Defensively, the build is quite capable and can withstand some wicked hits without going down. We have a life pool that can push over 7,500. We have consistent life leech and constant access to the buff Fortify. We also have completely capped physical damage reduction at 90%. We also both chill and maim our enemies, causing them to move slower and attack slower, making them easier to dodge and easier to kill. Finally, we have a cast when damage taken Molten Shell, over max resistances, and a chunk of both dodge and block chance. All in all, Lacerate Gladiator clears fast, slaughters bosses, and can take serious hits and get right back up. It can do all of this on a very flexible budget. Much like Stormburst, every single slot can be filled with a rare piece of gear if necessary. The very few unique items even included in the endgame set are extremely cheap, with a single exception being the Soul Taker Axe. a powerful unique that grants us some nice utility, allowing us to chill our enemies and essentially making all of our attacks free. It is recommended but not required for the build. It has a divination card which can be farmed in several maps, or, much like every other unique in the build, it can be swapped out for a rare item. The build performs very solidly on a low budget and can be scaled heavily into deep endgame. When 3.9 hits, this build will be seeing a couple of small changes. Body armor can no longer be fossil crafted with the modifier. Socketed gems are supported by level 1 MAME. This is a nerf to one of our best in slot options, however we still have plenty of good alternatives to choose from. Furthermore, we have yet to see what the new influence types are truly capable of. Without a doubt, many of those new modifiers will prove to be exceedingly helpful. The other changes affecting this build are going to be the slight nerf to Fortify and the buff to enemy armor levels. From GGG themselves, it sounds a lot scarier than it is because their base armor is stirringly unimpressive. The build will push through these slight balance changes just fine, and much like every other build, is going to be seeing a huge power boost from the Awakened support gems. A lot of these are absolutely insane, and if they're reasonably attainable, they'll be giving this build a huge power boost. If we're running Soul Taker, we can cram as many of those Awakened Soul Gems as we want to into the links, because we'll have no concern about how much mana Lacerate truly costs. I feel that even with the changes, Lacerate Gladiator is going to be exceedingly powerful and flexible and is well worth your consideration. Lacerate can be picked up very early at level 12 and can be used for the rest of the leveling process. If this build sounds interesting to you, or if you want to learn more about it, you can find the full build guide right here. And with that covered, it's time to move on to our next build, my newly reworked Shot Deadeye. The build is now easier and cheaper to gear, and features numerous added alternatives for each slot. Shot is a powerful offensive bow skill, capable of dishing out death to entire packs and bosses alike, without even having to put yourself in harm's way. Shot will no doubt prove to be a powerful and versatile candidate to mix with the new support gems. With all of our added projectiles, Barrage support will provide us with a very substantial single target DPS boost. And alternatively, Arrow Nova and Greater Volley support give us new ways to clear packs. The build moves fast and clears maps impressively quickly, while still managing to pull off some very competent single target damage that may have seen some serious improvement with the new Barrage support and the huge variety of Awakened support gems that will benefit this build very heavily. Defensively, the build pushes over 5,500 life, has a very solid chance to evade over 50%, and often caps out its attack and spell dodge at 75%. It also utilizes a cast wound damage taken steel skin as well. It also leeches life very heavily with Vol Pact and can bounce back from low health almost instantly. One of our greatest defenses though is simply being able to keep our distance and our ability to move very quickly. We have no trouble standing back away from danger and also dodging incoming attacks. Shot is versatile, powerful, and deadly, and we have a very hard time getting hit in the first place. When we do, we tend to bounce back very quickly. The build can rely on flexible and very easy to find gear during the leveling process. The main downside of this build is that it's a little bit trickier to gear for endgame compared to our last two builds. Our endgame weapon, quiver, and chest piece can all prove to be relatively expensive. The build also ideally wants to have a Dying Sun Flask, which will ultimately prove to be extremely expensive in this league. For each and every one of these expensive options, I've included a variety of much cheaper alternatives. The build can absolutely be run on a reasonable budget and can be utilized with a huge amount of flexible gear. But to push the build to its true endgame potential, you'll have to put in some serious investment. Shot itself was actually buffed and is receiving 26% increased base damage at level 20. The way it applies chill to enemies is also being changed heavily. Hiri's Ire has also received a pretty substantial nerf. It is still powerful enough to recommend as one of the top options, but there are a lot of good alternatives that you can consider. Also hit with a pretty substantial nerf was Mirage Archer. As such, I currently have it swapped out of the links in favor of cold penetration support. This change helping us shred through the increased elemental resistances of our enemies. But potentially one of the biggest changes to the build is losing consistent access to Void Fletcher. This won't affect our ability to clear entire screens in an instant whatsoever, but it does give us a reasonable hit to our single target damage. In previous leagues, Void Fletcher was absurdly cheap, but it remains to be seen just how affordable and available this item is in 3.9. If you have the opportunity to pick one of these up, do so immediately. You'll receive Shot as a reward for the very first quest in the game, meaning that you can scale Shot from the very earliest stages of the leveling experience all the way into the deep endgame. Shot just received a variety of buffs, nerfs, and changes, but its overall potential is very high. It's an incredible base to combine with the new Awakened, and projectile support gems, thrusting Ice Shot into a whole new realm of both clear and boss killing possibilities. If you're interested in this build or want to learn more about it, you can find a full build guide right here. Conquerors of the Atlas and Metamorph are shaping up to be an incredible league for Path of Exile, and I couldn't be more excited to finally play it. I'll be making brand new build guides throughout all of 3.9, so if you enjoyed the video, consider subscribing for more content just like this. A huge thank you to all of the patrons that support this channel. It's greatly appreciated. Special recognition goes to Vancture and Bloody for their dedicated support of the channel. Thank you again, guys. And if you made it this far into the video, thank you for watching. I hope the video proved helpful. If you have any questions for me, leave them down below and I'll do my best to answer. And as always, I've been Esoro, and I will see you guys in the next video.